Shalom Aleichem, everybody! Welcome to episode 3 of my Jewishness of Dragon Age series, where I analyze parts of the Dragon Age franchise that were influenced by or have parallels with Jewish cultures. Today, we'll be looking at Dragon Age's Chantry, and some of the organizations tied to it, such as the Templars and Inquisition. And if you haven't played Veilguard yet, don't worry. This series only covers materials from before that game's release. Dragon Age's Chantry is pretty shamelessly based on Christianity, what with its martyred messiah and architectural aesthetics. But you guys do remember that Christianity came from Judaism, right? Jesus, both the mythological figure and the historical one, was ethnically Jewish and raised within our culture. Because of this, people often make the false assumption that Judaism is just Christianity with fewer features. But this fails to recognize that Judaism continued to evolve after Christianity split from it. And also, while we do share some texts, our faiths have very different interpretations of them. As someone who had to study a lot of those texts, it feels pretty obvious to me that the Torah, a group of Jewish books that Christians incorporated into the New Testament, was the basis for Dragon Age's Chant of Light, or at least the parts that precede Andrastian. Just look at the parallels between the 5th Canticle of Threnodies and the 1st chapter of Genesis. In both religions, the world begins as a void, until their deity starts to speak things into existence. This deity creates celestial beings to help them with the task of forming and managing the world. They start separating concepts such as darkness and light from one another to exist as opposites, and create a magical location that humans will be forbidden from entering. The deity creates said humans last, and places them in charge of the earth. The deity's creations refer to it as Father. Some of the celestial beings grow jealous of the humans and try to get the humans to follow them instead of their creator. Yes, Judaism has fallen angels as well. Hey, Azazel. The deity punishes some of these celestial beings by binding them to the earth. Again, hey, Azazel. Yet, some of these beings still manage to influence humans, visiting them in their dreams and convincing them to worship them in exchange for lessons in forbidden magic. One more time, lads. Hey, Azazel. Looking at other parts of the chant, there are even more parallels. Shartan rallying the Jewish-coded elves to escape and resist their enslavers echoes Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt. The Magisters trying to enter the Golden City, only to be punished with the Blight, reminds me of the Jewish myth where humans tried to build a tower that would be tall enough to reach God, and were cursed as a punishment. We both have categories of animals that we consider unclean, and have rules against consuming blood. Both of our religions believe in an end of days that will be brought along by a Messiah during which our deity will judge us, but supposedly there will then be no more war and every species will live together in harmony. In Transfigurations 1, Andrastian lists some of the truths the Maker delivered to her, and someone better call H. Bomber Guy, cause I'm sensing some plagiarism from the 10 Commandments here. I mean, come on. Don't steal, don't bear false witness, don't murder people, there is only one God and that God is me, so don't worship idols. Could you make it any more obvious that you copied Judaism's homework? There are also ways that Jewish midrashim, stories that expand upon the Torah but are located in other texts or passed down orally, can enhance our readings of the Chant of Light. For example, Erudition 2.1 describes how some of the spirits grew jealous of humans' corporeal forms and became demons to possess them. In Judaism, there's a group of creatures called shadim that God never built bodies for, so now they try to steal ours. In Dragon Age, there's a group called the Templars who are supposed to prevent such spirits from possessing people and to hunt down those who have already succumbed, but they've become infamous for twisting this mission into abuses of power. Our world's Templars were an order of Christian knights whose job it was to serve as bodyguards for European pilgrims in Southwest Asia. And I'm here to tell you that there is no link between Templars and Jews. You might think this is something I shouldn't need to specify, but let me walk you through why I have. There are quite a few conspiracy theories surrounding the Templars. While historical records tell us this group was disbanded in the 1310s, some people with zero qualifications or evidence have decided to spread the myth that this organization didn't actually
actually disband, they just went into hiding, where they've been using arcane Jewish magic to control the government.
While there's nothing inherently wrong with speculative fiction that explores the concept of, what if the Templars continued to operate in secret? It does stop being fun once people start claiming that the Templars use evil magic that they learned from Jewish people, or that Jews were the ones to corrupt this originally pure and virtuous Christian organization into a Baphomet-worshipping cult. This conspiracy that Templars are somehow a Jewish New World Order has been around since at least the 1790s, and is so prominent that even people who know better than to believe that Jews controlled the Templars have still walked away with the misconception that our groups are somehow positively connected. I wanted to include this segment of the video just in case any of you out there held that misconception, and so I wouldn't get comments like,
"But you forgot to talk about how the Jews and the Templars were best friends and we all went out for ice cream."
In my research for this video, the closest I could come to finding a peer-reviewed source or a historical document to back up these claims was a blog post from a Templar Knight fanatic who talks about aliens on the History Channel. For those of you who don't know, the History Channel, despite its name, is most well known for releasing clickbait documentaries that portray baseless conspiracy theories as facts. Experts in the fields these documentaries supposedly cover have resoundingly denounced this channel for abusing the authoritative status viewers assume something called the History Channel must have in order to spread misinformation. So yeah, forgive me if I'm a little skeptical of a claim whose most reputable source is the History Channel. While I couldn't find any evidence of positive relationships between the Templars and Jews, I did find evidence of the Templars looting from Jews. Remember, the Templars were part of the Crusades, which Dragon Age used as the basis for their Exalted Marches. Dragon Age's Exalted Marches were a series of military operations that the Orlesian Chantry called to conquer lands from nations it had deemed heretical, such as the Tevinter Imperium, Kunari, or elves. The Crusades were a group of wars that the Pope used to call to take over territories that were controlled by non-Catholic governments. Most of the Crusades targeted the Abrahamic Holy Lands, and for any non-Christians living there, they were an absolute nightmare. Entire communities were massacred and subjected to horrific war crimes such as torture and assault. During these invasions, many Jews were enslaved or taken hostage by Christians to blackmail people in Jewish communities the Crusades hadn't reached yet for money or their cooperation. Even for the Jews back in Europe, it was a horrific period. Wannabe crusaders who didn't have it in them to go all the way to Asia still tried to gain glory by attacking their Jewish neighbors. Even those who were headed east often made detours along the way to massacre local Jewish communities. To quote an abbot from the period, "Why pursue the enemies of the Christian faith in far and distant lands when the Jews live in our midst with impunity?" Sources from this period say no Jew was spared, regardless of age or gender. Entire cities were ethnically cleansed of their Jewish populations, with the refugees hunted like animals. News of these anti-Semitic massacres reached Southwest Asia before any of the Crusaders ever did, and communities there of all faiths reacted with absolute horror. Another horrific period of anti-Semitism that Dragon Age chose to take inspiration from, and even named one of its games after, is the Inquisition. The Inquisition was a Catholic organization that existed to hunt down those who didn't share their faith and kill those who would not convert. It was the Inquisition that convinced the Spanish and Portuguese governments to expel Jews from their countries, displacing over 100,000 people and creating the Sephardi diaspora. Jews who couldn't flee fast enough were interrogated, imprisoned, and tortured in ways that I literally cannot explain on this platform without violating its guidelines. During the Inquisition, thousands of Jewish children were kidnapped from their families and sent to Portuguese and Spanish colonies as slaves. Even adults who converted to Catholicism in order to avoid the expulsion were still under constant suspicion from their neighbors, brought in for interrogations, and tortured regardless. Dragon Age's Inquisition began as a similarly horrifying force that BioWare's own blog says were the cause of a dark and terrifying time in the history of Thedas. This organization scoured the land for magical threats and those that did not follow Andrastianism, until the Chantry repurposed them into... Oh, of course they became the Templars. That tracks. In Dragon Age's third game, you reform the Inquisition as a force to combat Corypheus. But, at least from what I recall, the original Inquisition's role and the harm it caused is something you're never forced to reconcile with. Even the Codex entry you get about the original Inquisition is written by a Chantry apologist who people less familiar with the franchise might not know to flag as an unreliable narrator and instead take at face value. In many Jewish communities, and especially Sephardi ones who trace their ancestry directly back to this expulsion, the Inquisition is treated with the same level of solemnity that we treat the Holocaust. It hurts to have one of my favorite franchises name one of their heroic factions after a group that was dedicated to the eradication of my culture. Obviously, it's too late to rename Dragon Age's Inquisition, but I hope this video has expanded everyone watching's knowledge about these harmful histories that fantasy franchises tend to name factions after. Hopefully it will encourage all of you to investigate where terms that you use in your own creative works come from. Our next episode will be on magic, and cover even more terminology that Dragon Age has borrowed from Jewish history, in addition to also covering the history of how witches and wizards have been coded as Jewish in a similar way to how the dwarves were in the first episode. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon if you want to be notified when that episode is up. Bye!